May I have your attention, please, for a very important public service announcement. We are taking over the internet, and the United States champion of word wrestling entertainment has returned for another edition of the Pocket Locker podcast. That's right. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, I am in airplane mode. Y'all already know what time it is. Grab something to drink, grab something to smoke. It is time to link up with the gang and catch a vibe as we jump into the musical portion of the program. Here's to all you watching at home. Cheers, gang. You may drink. But we are two worlds apart. I can't reach to your heart when I say I want it that way. Tell me why. Ain't nothing but a mistake. Tell me why. Ain't nothing but a heartache. All right, let's give out some pocket change. I got Carrie Ann Chrysler first. Am I your fire, your one desire? Lena is second in the place. Let's go. And Crystal is third. Tell me why. That's for 2,500 pocket change. And tell me why I never want to hear you say I want it that way. Now that I see that we're falling apart and it's more than. What's up, Randy? Yeah. Hey, Dave. That was fantastic. Scary Pockets, of course. Check those fools out. And now it is time to take off on this shit, gang. The first story of the day is one for the hip hop heads. And also you fans of justice. Apparently there has finally been an arrest in the murder of Tupac Shakur. Now, gang, the only question I could think of for the question of today was really just, are you a Tupac and Biggie or a Biggie person? It's the age-old question. Tupac or Biggie? And I got to be honest with you. East Coast is the Beast Coast. Tupac's cool, had a lot of hits and all that. But Biggie's my man till I die. Number one, Biggie. Like I still don't put nobody in front of Biggie. Like Jay-Z's probably one of my favorite artists of all time. Can't do it. A lot of people think Eminem's like the greatest rapper to ever live. Can't do it. There was just something magical, once in a lifetime about the Notorious B.I.G. Still love his music. All his music still bangs just as hard today as it did back then. But look, man, Tupac is one of the greatest hip hop artists of all time. Arguably just one of the greatest American recording artists of all time. His influence on the culture and on the world can't even be measured by record sales or ticket sales. I mean, all them numbers are crazy, but it's really hard to put sorry, y'all probably hear some music in the back. That's my neighbors having a party or something. To put his influence on pop culture and hip hop culture in words is kind of hard. It's probably immeasurable. And that's the one thing I could say about Tupac is that he's really one of them artists who just had an outsized influence on people even to this day. And so his murder going unsolved, especially when he was murdered, you know, in such a big public setting, and as part of that big, you know, while that whole a lot of beefs and controversy was going on in the community, it's just always sort of felt. I think a lot of people just always felt racist. It's always just felt like there's no way if a white recording artist or pop star that had reached similar heights of success just got murdered, that it would go unsolved for so long. It always felt to people like, no way. If he was white, they would have had the top investigators on it, and they would have never let somebody get away with killing this man. And I think that the thing when I first saw the story was like, oh, okay, I'm definitely interested in this, is because, you know, hopefully it's a story that wasn't true, that actually people have always been on it. They stayed on it. And sometimes justice is just slow like that. So I'm excited about this story. I wasn't expecting to wake up and see this. I haven't seen it. I don't really know what the story is. I just know the headline. So we're gonna check it out together. And yeah, let's get into it. All right, look, I gotta practice for the show tomorrow. Y'all know I gotta get with Uncle Bobby. I gotta make sure I remember the damn protocol. So we're gonna Autobots transform and roll out. Then we're gonna hit it with that blow up situation station. Y'all already know. And then we're gonna roll his tape.
My name's Jason Johansson, and I'm the homicide lieutenant with the.
Pause the tape. I'm just gonna say, Detective Jason Johansson, you have a great first name. You know, there's just something. I gotta be honest. You know, there's me and my mom are very different people. And it's kind of scary to think like you go back and this person birthed you out their womb, and then, you know, has such a outsized influence on your life. And, you know, fingers crossed, hopefully they're not insane. But man, I got to tell you, one thing me and my mother have always been on the same page about is I like that first name, Jason. I really do. I have never, there has never come a day where I hated having Jason as my first name. It's just, go fuck yourself, gang. It's a cool name. It's still cool. It's 2023, just like it was in 1986. That's a great first name, sir.
Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And my goal here today is to walk you through our investigation and what led us to the indictment of Dwayne Davis, also known as Keefe D, for the murder of Tupac Shakur.
Y'all think Keefe D smokes weed? How do you end up with the nickname Keefe? What is the origin of this story? Is Keefe's mom available? Cousins,
This case has
Ray and them. Somebody
by
gotta tell
our
us the
homicide
story.
team and homicide detectives for over 2.5 decades. And ultimately, our persistence in this investigation has paid off. Let me walk you through a timeline of events that as we know them right now.
I'm just gonna say the immediate effect right here of all this is very chilling. I know it may just be, you know, the man just got picked up and they just took a mug shot, but there's just something about the way all of this is set up. It's like a fucking stone cold who done it or whatever for I don't know, between 20, 30, 25 years or whatever the fuck it's been. And then you just have this man, he got that cold, and you thinking in your head, like, I'm gonna just put it this way, gang. You don't have to convince me you don't fuck around if you murder a celebrity. You murder a celebrity pretty much in I don't want to say broad daylight, I think it was at night, but in very public settings, like you scary motherfucker. Okay, this is I wouldn't want to deal with this man.
Prior to September 7th of 1996, as we all know, Tupac Shakur was a artist who was signed with Death Row Records. And that Death Row Records and its CEO, Marion Suge Knight, were closely affiliated with the Mob Piru criminal street gangs, and that they had an ongoing feud with the Southside Compton Crips.
Bro, what did you say everybody know? Bro, everybody don't know this, bro. What? Nah, everybody just run that back. Run that back. What's going on?
Shakur was a artist who was signed with Death Row Records, and that Death Row Records and its CEO, Marion Suge Knight, were closely affiliated with the Mob Piru criminal street gangs, and that they had an ongoing feud with the Southside Compton Crips. Dwayne Davis was the leader and shot caller of the Southside Compton Crips.
Damn.
And both of these gangs operated out of the Southern California area of Compton. On the night of September 7th of 1996, Tupac Shakur, along with Suge Knight, and members of their entourage, which include members of Mob Piru, came to Vegas to attend the Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Members of the Southside Compton Crips, which included Dwayne Davis, along with his nephew Orlando Anderson, were also in attendance at the same event. As both were leaving the fight, members of Death Row Records spotted Orlando Anderson near an elevator bank inside the MGM, and at that time they began to kick and punch him near that elevator bank. I will now show you hotel security footage, as many of you have already seen, related to this incident. And on this incident,
this footage has been shown in like documentaries about either Tupac or Suge Knight. But yeah, these stories are kind of popular, but I don't think everybody knows him.
Shiny satiny shirt, along with Marion Suge Knight, who's a large man in a brown suit, punching and kicking Orlando Anderson. Following this incident, you'll see hotel security intervene, and then they will leave the area of the fight.
This is insane. They just beat that man down in the middle of a fucking casino.
It is this incident right here that would ultimately lead to the retaliatory shooting and death of Tupac Shakur. Following this incident, Tupac and Suge Knight both left the MGM to make their way to a post-fight party, which was to occur at a local nightclub.
It was a Tyson fight that night, I think.
At the same time, word had spread amongst members of the Southside Compton Crips of what had occurred inside the MGM. And then that's when Dwayne Davis began to devise a plan to obtain a firearm and retaliate against Suge Knight and Mr. Shakur for what occurred inside the hotel against Mr. Anderson.
Holy shit, this is wild. You cannot write this shit. It's like when you see this shit in documentaries and they be speculating and talking about this shit, you're just transformed into this whole world of violence. It's in to hear now, like a detective just sitting here relaying all these events and all of these details. It really is chilling as fuck. And ooh, it's like Ooh. I'm into violence, y'all. For some reason, I'm into violent video games and violent sports and all of that stuff. But the reality of interpersonal violence in public like this is it's just incredibly scary. There's nothing cute about this. The actual fucking back and forth gang violence, like holy shit.
After Davis obtained a gun, he entered into a white Cadillac along with Terrence Brown, DeAndre Smith, and Orlando Anderson. Based on our investigation, this is where we know they were seated.
Yeah.
At some point in time, as they were in the white Cadillac, Mr. Davis took the gun that he had
Like
obtained and
27
provided it to
years.
the passengers in the rear seat of the vehicle. As they were driving west on Flamingo Road near Koval, they located the black BMW, which was driven by Suge Knight, and in the passenger seat was Tupac Shakur. And as they turned around, they pulled up near the passenger side of that vehicle and immediately began shooting at Mr. Knight and Mr. Shakur. Following that shooting, the white Cadillac fled the area southbound on Koval. And after our officers arrived on scene, Tupac was later transported to the University Medical Center, where he was treated medically and died approximately 6 days later on September 13th.
So we were watching a video yesterday of a former WWE wrestler talking about 5 things in his life that are worse because of being a pro wrestler. What's up, non-believer? And one of the things he said was giving up his privacy, that he would never be able to truly be like a private person again, and talked about an incident where basically got robbed at gunpoint sitting on his porch with his girlfriend. And before the guy left, he was like, he had a gun pointed at him. He's like, I got you anytime I want you. Just letting him know, like, I can always come get you. And so, man, looking back at it, it's kind of surprising that an artist at Tupac's level would be involved in anything like this, right? Because it's so hard to move safely and move anonymously, and so I'm just imagining that night of the fight happens, and they start plotting revenge, and then obviously people are probably following him, or otherwise word gets out and they know where he's at. Yeah, but you gotta remember, you're in like Vegas, like it's just crazy that this is a crazy story.
My homicide section handled this investigation from its onset and for a short amount of time. And within a short amount of time, what we knew was that we were working a gang investigation where our victims, our witnesses, and our suspects were all from Southern California and not local to Las Vegas. Within the first few months of the investigation, our detectives knew most of the information I just briefed you on. However, we never had the necessary evidence to bring this case forward and present it for criminal charges. As time went on, this case had been reviewed multiple times by different investigators assigned to my section, but it wasn't until 2018 that this case was reinvigorated as additional information came to light related to this homicide. Specifically, Dwayne Davis's own admissions to his involvement in this homicide investigation that he provided to numerous different media outlets.
Wow. I was wondering if that's related to that show.
In our section, we knew at this time that this was likely our last time to take a run at this case to successfully solve this case and bring forth a criminal charge. It was at that time that this case was assigned to Cliff Mogg, a detective within my homicide section. And over the last 5 years, my section worked closely, hand in hand with the Clark County District Attorney's Office and followed a systematic investigative plan over the last 5 years. We've conducted countless interviews and corroborated numerous facts that were not only consistent with the crime scene on the night of the incident, but also corroborated and were consistent with the sequence of events that night. This ultimately led to us procuring a search warrant which was executed at Mr. Davis's residence in Henderson, Nevada. And following the execution of that search warrant, in close coordination with the District Attorney's Office, this case was presented to the grand jury, which ultimately led to Davis being indicted on charges of murder.
An arrest and indictment in the murder.
Wow. So they like, I wonder if this was the first time they ever actually searched them, and it's crazy to think that they would find evidence all this time later.
Murder of legendary rapper Tupac Shakur. Really, investigators, they're going into stunning detail about how his murder was a retaliatory killing, that an investigation in which they knew soon after the murder of Tupac around September of 1996, the details of, but a case that went cold until 2018, and now one that is headed potentially for a conviction.
They showed this surveillance video.
It almost has the feeling of like one of those cases where he wanted people to know, right? Like if if he's talking about it with media outlets, and then they're able to find, I guess, significant evidence in the home. It'll be interesting to see how those details play out at trial. I'm sure it'll be headline making.
And they said this is a moment, this altercation, that ultimately led to that moment on September 7th, 1996, on the Las Vegas Strip, where someone pulled up, multiple people, in a white Cadillac, they believe, and shot into the passenger side of Tupac Shakur's vehicle, ultimately killing him. Days later, he died in a hospital. But I think people are in disbelief today. Fans of his music, people who knew him, his family as well. They've carried this hurt for so long. And now knowing that police have arrested someone, also they said there were 3 other suspects, but all of them are deceased.
Yeah, and the arrest they made, you're looking at the mugshot there on your screen.
Damn, so they probably die young too, man. That life is not one for those who want to be around to be senior citizens, man. Like, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And honestly, there's just no reason artists should be living that type of life. I think it's really unfortunate that people with so much talent and success were caught up in shit like that. It's crazy. It's still to this day, it still feels very tragic. But I think if anything, like, that needs to be a part of his legacy, right? Is being emblematic of what that type of violence can do and how devastating it is to communities. Unbelievable stuff, y'all. All right, y'all, let's jump into the main event of the afternoon. All right, and we are going to be talking about the New York Times apparently anti-trans agenda. And I'm gonna just go ahead and say this is concerning. Obviously, the New York Times has a lot of public reputability, and I feel like in today's media climate in America, with so many right-wing propaganda outlets, a source like the New York Times, I think they're basically assumed to be center, if not center left. I don't think liberals and progressives really feel like it's liberal or progressive, but it's definitely kind of presented that way. And I have heard that they're fucked up when it comes to trans issues. And at the time, I think it was, at least my thinking of it was kind of discussed as a issue of perspective and representation. Um, Maybe other stories, but I never really got details of that. And that's not to say that I doubted it. You know, I believe what people tell me because people are paying attention to these things that affect them. But I just think that this particular story we're about to hear probably offers a little bit more specifics as to uh, what people in the trans community are dealing with when it comes to this outlet and this particular issue. So I'm very interested in hearing the details because, again, like I said, I've heard that the New York Times is anti-trans, but just didn't get as many details as I'd like to have. So looking forward to hearing this story. I'm gonna share it with y'all. Yeah, let's see what's going on. All right, here I am already fucking up the protocol. Let's try this. All right, so we gotta Autobots transform again because we gotta bring up a whole new thing. Boop. All right. Then we're gonna roll out. Okay, look at me go. Then we're gonna blow up. Shui, I can do this. I know how to stream. All right, let's take off on this, gang.
You can trust the mainstream media on, and that's untrustworthy reporting. There's often only one thing you can trust the mainstream media on, and that's untrustworthy reporting. They are motivated by engagement, investors, political affiliation, fame, and in the case of journalists, sometimes extreme personal bias. This is very clear when you examine how they report on issues affecting marginalized people. The framing when someone is charged with murder, when a teacher assaults a student, or when literally anything involving trans people is reported on. An example of which is the absolutely disgusting series of events we're discussing today. When this New York Times piece came out, I was aware it was, well, BS. But I wasn't a New York Times.
All right, how a small gender clinic landed in a political storm. Washington University's youth gender clinic in St. Louis, like others around the world, was overwhelmed by new patients and struggled to provide them with mental health care. Okay.
Piece came out. I was aware it was, well, BS. But I wasn't aware of the outright fabrications until later, when I read the assigned media piece by Evan Urquhart, a fantastic journalist who you need to follow if you want accurate reporting on trans issues and discourses. Links in the description. The New York Times article in question is written by Azine Qureshi, a woman not only obsessed with trans people, and particularly young trans people, but one who seems intent on spreading misinformation about the community. Scroll through the article she's written for the New York Times, and it's fairly clear she's propping her career up on the back of an anti-trans panic. She is, of course, not the only person to do this, and this is, of course, not the only time this has happened, but it's a perfect example of how it occurs and the harms it causes. And this family deserves to have their real story heard without being filtered through the lens of someone else's vicious agenda. Most of the quotes you'll hear are from the piece in Assigned Media by Evan Urquhart regarding the parents of the trans youth, Heidi and her husband. While Qureshi pushed to speak with their daughter, they never agreed.
When Heidi first got in contact with Azine Qureshi of the New York Times, there was one thing she made clear from the start. She would not participate in an article that portrayed the St. Louis clinic where her daughter had received life-saving treatment in a negative light. The parent, whose last name we're not using to protect the family's safety, had never spoken to a reporter about her daughter's treatment or transgender identity before. Now, though apprehensive, she felt she had to speak up. Private people, they dislike the idea of having a spotlight on themselves or their daughter. However, when a former worker at Washington University's Transgender Center came forward with wild allegations, Heidi's family was among those who saw their child's most private medical information, twisted but recognizable, in that worker's outlandish claims. Former staff member Jamie Reed claimed their daughter had developed a liver toxicity from a drug called bicalutamide, which a doctor at the center had prescribed as a puberty blocker. Reed said the family had been so angry they emailed calling it a huge PR problem for the center, and they were lucky the family weren't the type to sue.
All right, now this is one of the problems with this whole anti-trans panic, is that there's always real people caught in the crossfire. You know, we recognize that this is a political football. We recognize the bigotry and all of that, but we sometimes overlook the fact that there are real people. They're just real ass individuals who have fucked up shit happening to them for absolutely no reason. And it's just got to be awful to have your medical information out there, or people spinning stories about your care, and then you have to respond publicly to something that should have never been public in the first place. And it does uh, make public figures out of private citizens who never intend to be. It's a real shame.
This was false. There was no such email. The family had never regretted the treatment, and the link between the liver symptoms and bicalutamide was murkier than had been presented by Reed. Reed's allegations imply a parent who was furious after stopping a harmful and unnecessary treatment for her child. The real person behind that story is the mother of a trans girl whose gratitude for the center knows no bounds.
Jamie Reed, for all intents and purposes, is as much of a whistleblower as I would be if I started telling people I used to work at a hot dog factory and everyone there was complicit in murdering dogs. Oh, if you're not dog murderers, then what's this? Game, set, match. Azim Qureshi, of course, knew that Jamie Reed had at points either been mistaken or lied about her claims of what she encountered while working at the gender clinic.
Some of Ms. Reed's claims could not be confirmed, and at least one included factual inaccuracies. But others were corroborated, offering a rare glimpse into one of the 100 or so clinics in the United States that have been at the center of an intensifying fight over transgender rights.
Factual inaccuracies is a really interesting way to put it. Did we know that some of her claims could not be verified? Yes. Did we understand some of her claims weren't true? Absolutely. Did we publish the story anyway? Of course we did. It's called journalism, not like truthnolism. So yeah, finding someone who wouldn't report unconfirmed stories or lies about the situation is kind of an imperative if you want to know the truth. Ad-driven algorithms have made sensationalizing stories and publishing them with clickbait titles the most profitable way to deliver the news, which has made finding legit coverage of current events increasingly difficult. That's why this video is sponsored by Ground News, the first news
Oh my
comparison
goodness,
platform.
I can't with the Ground News. No, nope. Just can't even with the Ground News. Nope. All right, now, gang, this is a problem, because I don't want to hear shit about the ad-driven stories, clickbait, click through, and all of this fucking nonsense. Like, your brand, the thing that's supposed to be the most valuable to you, the thing that's supposed to be the most marketable to you, if you're the New York Times, is your fucking journalistic integrity. And when they don't uphold like even the most basic standards of journalistic integrity, and it's something like this, it's almost impossible to not think of it as playing into a wider agenda, because this is such a hot and sensitive political and social topic right now. So you already know you're handling this issue with a lot of attention one way or the other, either tremendous sensitivity or tremendous insensitivity. But to me, there's no middle ground on that. So I think obviously trans people are going to feel betrayed, and they should. And I think a lot of us should be outraged, because again, this is such a hot topic right now. This is all we're going to be talking about, this constantly for the next year or more, with the presidential election coming up, because every single candidate makes this like an issue, especially the Republicans. So I don't know. I in some sense, I hate to say it, but I think trans issues, particularly trans in sports and all this nonsense, is gonna be one of, if the not number one political issue because of the climate we find ourselves in. Not happy about that, but that's what I see happening.
Especially because they do things like meticulously comb through every single assertion made by Jamie Reed about her time at the clinic to
Let
depict
me
hidden access.
there we go.
For trans issues, sign up or subscribe through my link for 30% off unlimited access. For trans issues, the first stop for me is Assigned Media, who did not in fact sponsor this video. I just very much value the reporting. Especially because they do things like meticulously comb through every single assertion made by Jamie Reed about her time at the clinic to determine if Azine's claims that they are corroborated held any water. They don't.
The totality of Reed's allegations contain many inaccuracies. Some are errors of medical understanding, places where Reed asserts things about the medicine, side effects, or standards of care and treatment of trans youth that simply aren't true. Many others are broad statements, claims about how employees at the center routinely conducted themselves. These have been contradicted by every patient and parent to have come forward thus far. Out of 69 claims Reed made about the Transgender Center, we found that the reporting in the New York Times, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Missouri Independent, or other outlets refutes or casts grave doubt over 22. We found 34 allegations that have not been subject to reporting that we know of, 3 where some evidence exists that casts doubts on Reed's claims, and 2 that are uncorroborated, but we believe are likely to be true, though misleading. We found just 7 claims that could be considered corroborated by the New York Times or anyone else. None of the corroborated claims include allegations of wrongdoing on the part of the center.
Azine Qureshi's entire piece rests on the integrity of Jamie Reed's claims, and I would say Azine has rested her entire credibility as a journalist on Reed's claims. That is to say, when it comes to credibility, I think Azine's is dead in the water. Not only are Reed's claims uncorroborated, unproven, and a little unhinged, they also caused an incredible amount of damage.
As is now widely known, Reed's allegations snowballed into a formal investigation of the Center for Wrongdoing, emergency directives from the state attorney general that would have halted medical transition for all patients, and culminated in a law banning the very treatments that helped Heidi's daughter to thrive. Through it all, their family had to watch with the knowledge that their personal information had been twisted and manipulated, used to further political attacks on other families like theirs. The knowledge was particularly devastating for Heidi's daughter, whose normally stellar grades suffered as a result.
That is just unbelievably cruel. Unbelievably cruel. And of course, like it may not come up in the story, but to me, there's just a religious Christo-fascist fucking agenda at the heart of all of this. And it's just amazing that we essentially allow people to conduct themselves this way.
That's why, despite a deep reluctance about speaking to reporters, and despite suspicions about Qureshi's intentions based on her previous work, Heidi emailed her in early August, offering to tell her family's story to the New York Times. According to Heidi, Qureshi responded quickly, eager to hear more. Alone among the people Qureshi spoke with, Heidi had something more than general information showing a picture of the center that ran contrary to the sorts of things Reed claimed. Because her daughter's history was in the affidavit, Heidi could provide Qureshi with the specific email to the center proving that Reed had misrepresented its contents. In layman's terms, Heidi's email allowed Qureshi to catch Reed in a lie.
Heidi says that Qureshi understood how this was significant, that she said it changed the trajectory of her story. When the day before the article was to be published, and Heidi encountered Qureshi talking to Reed in the same manner as she would with Heidi, she became uneasy.
Heidi began to suspect the story would be a positive portrayal of Reed, the woman she'd proved had misrepresented her daughter's private medical history in a sworn affidavit. During their encounter, she describes seeing Reed looking over to Qureshi during the encounter, seeking support. According to Heidi, the confrontation ended with herself in tears and Reed laughing as she walked away.
This is a positive portrayal of her.
She recalls telling Qureshi,
"We're out. We're out."
Heidi tells Assigned Media that Qureshi followed them back to their car, standing in front of the open car door so that they weren't able to drive off.
Qureshi was adamantly arguing for the family not to leave, not to end the conversation, and above all, not to pull out of the piece. Eventually, Heidi and her husband drove away, feeling certain that they were through. But Qureshi called, and eventually they relented.
They spent 3 hours going over the article as described by Qureshi. And despite the fact that Heidi and her husband did not approve of what was written, were upset by it, and wanted to pull out from the piece, they knew that if they did, there would be
nothing on the record showing that Reed's affidavit directly misrepresented a specific event. You've betrayed us, Azine. You have completely betrayed us, Heidi recalls telling Qureshi that night. Defeated, they eventually agreed that their story would remain in the piece.
These parents were
That is fucking awful. Again, just forced to escalate their vulnerability to deal with shit that should have never been publicized. And this is just like, I don't know, like for most people, like your medical business and like your sex life, I think those are probably like the two things that people consider to just be amongst the most sensitive and private information. Shit that's just none of anybody else's business at all. So this is really tragic. And yeah, I don't know, but you wonder if the New York Times will ever if they'll even acknowledge something like this, or what happens. Like what do we do with this?
Misled, misrepresented, and mistreated. They were used and then betrayed by someone who gained their trust just enough to abuse it. And they weren't the only ones. Before the story was published, one parent, Jennifer Harris Dalt, had thanked Qureshi for her reporting. She felt she'd been empathetic and understood what their family had been going through.
She'd asked Qureshi what she'd found in her reporting, and says the reporter told her that not only had she found nothing criminal, she found nothing that would be considered unethical that the clinic had done. If that's an accurate representation of what Qureshi believed she had found, it seems to have gotten a bit muddled in the piece that she wrote. The story ends on a note of seeming to validate Reed, whose allegations contain serious reports of potentially criminal behavior by center staff. All the illusions Harris Dalt held that the story would help families of trans youth in Missouri came crashing down the morning the New York Times piece went live. Harris Dalt describes waking up to the notification and reading it straight away. She remembers thinking, this clearly doesn't sound like the article we discussed. Like the other parents I spoke with, Harris Dalt let Qureshi know how disappointed she was.
Another parent, Becky Hormuth, met Qureshi in an emotional 3.5-hour meeting set up by advocacy groups. She trusted Azine Qureshi, even when other parents did not. She believed her to be deeply empathetic.
Qureshi expressed interest in hearing more from Hormuth because her son's experience of receiving extensive psychiatric help directly contradicted Reed, whose allegations accused the center of lying to parents about offering such help. Hormuth agreed to let Qureshi follow up and says she spent hours in a video call with both the reporter and her trans son. Like Harris Dalt, Hormuth remembers trusting Qureshi, even defending her to other parents who warned her that the reporter was manipulative and couldn't be trusted.
Wow.
Now, looking back, she says, I was so dumb. Once she'd read the story, like the other parents, she was very disappointed and very angry. She confronted Qureshi and remembers saying something like, you fucking gave Reed too much credit. I feel we kind of got screwed over here because we gave you all this information, our records, everything to show you how she lied. We gave you all this. I am not an activist. I am a journalist, she recalls Qureshi replying.
I am incredibly grateful to the diligent, honest, and thorough reporting from Assigned Media, but more so, I'm grateful for the empathy they showed and for the voice they've given to these parents. On this New York Times piece, I'll leave you with this, what the parents said when Assigned Media gave them the opportunity to tell the public something Qureshi didn't, to set the record straight. Jennifer Harris Dalt wanted people to know that unlike the way parents of trans youth are represented in the media, they actually care deeply about their child's treatment at these clinics.
We care about the clinic we take our children to. We care that it is providing
Damn.
ethical care. We care that it is following the standards of care. But using the words of Reed, who has been shown to be unethical, to deny health care to all these people just isn't right. In Missouri, politicians are making healthcare decisions right now, none of whom are qualified to do so.
Yeah, and the New York Times fucking knows this. There's just no plausible way to, yeah, I don't. This is just a straight up betrayal. I don't. This is really bad.
Said that she keeps going back to the healthcare aspect.
Azine could have highlighted that our kids have been treated for all these things, that our kids are thriving and doing well. She had proof that our kids are thriving. But instead, she made everything that had to do with that about kids who are suffering with mental health issues. Our healthcare system has struggled with that for a long time, and she's taking these flaws that are in a whole system and laying it at the feet of one clinic.
Heidi was concerned that the center's lack of response to Gracie's questions would be seen by many people as they're having something to hide.
How can we ask them to keep our privacy and then get mad when they say they can't say anything publicly because of our privacy? You can't apply two different standards. How are we not taking them as credible when we know they can't talk?
But where did the New York Times go so wrong? Have they always been like this? Or is this a recent development brought on by the rise in anti-trans hatred? The Translash podcast spoke to a trans person and former writer at the New York Times about exactly this. Harper describes a series of events that were troubling, a streak of anti-LGBTQ+ reporting, things like refusing to acknowledge in print that the Family Research Council has been designated a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, despite doing so for other groups they reported on, like white nationalists.
I wake up to messages. Oh my God, did you see? Did you see? Did you see it? Everyone is speaking out. Everyone is DMing me.
Harper's heart sank as they started to understand what the avalanche of messages was about. The New York Times had published a book review by Jesse Singal. He's the first mainstream journalist to spread disinformation about a supposed trans social contagion. And he's well known for being a provocateur who consistently attacks trans people online.
Yeah, the New York Times can fuck all the way off with that shit. And this is exactly this is the Anna Kasparian, right? This is literally exactly Anna Kasparian's shit. Hanging out with fucking, I want to say Lilo and Stitch, Adam and Stitch, or whatever those right-wing idiots are, talking about nothing's wrong with Jesse Singal, and ignoring the fact that this man is literally become synonymous with transphobia. Like, it's just incredible.
Singal had been tapped to review the book, Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality by anti-trans writer Helen Joyce, which argues that gender identity isn't real and that gender is a biological fact.
Wow.
Anyone familiar with Singal at all would be aware of his anti-trans leanings, so choosing him to review the book sent a loud message. And as Harper began to read the book review, they realized it was essentially a buffet of anti-trans talking points.
I won't delve too much into this because I really think you should just give Translash the attention on this one. But know this story and Azine are not where this started, and they aren't where it will end. Despite all evidence presented, the Times owns up to nothing.
We reject the claim that our coverage is biased. The role of an independent news organisation is to report on issues of public importance and follow the facts where they lead. As part of that mission, we've reported fully and fairly on transgender issues ranging from challenges and prejudice faced by the community to the fight for expanding rights and freedoms and open debates about care. Our coverage has been rigorously reported and edited, respectful of the people we're covering and sensitive to the moment.
Yeah, no, that's that both sides bullshit right there. That pretending that there's a middle ground that you can uniquely represent, and that's the problem. It's like people who say, oh, you know what, let's talk about evolution and creationism. I mean, they're both just alternative theories. Let's hear what both sides have to say. Let's be fair and balanced. nah.
It is providing a vital service to the LGBTQ+ community and our readership. The New York Times has published hundreds of articles, with a collective word count well over 330,000, specifically on discrimination against transgender people and/or anti-transgender legislation since January 2020.
In response, Translash took them to task with receipts.
As we reported, the New York Times dedicated 10,000 words of front-page coverage to raising concerns about medical care for trans youth in 2022, yet 0 front-page stories were dedicated to the nationwide, persistent, and coordinated attacks to take away gender-affirming healthcare from trans youth in that year. Given what stories the New York Times is choosing to center and elevate, how can the New York Times deny anti-trans bias in its coverage? In the statement,
Yeah, exactly. Pause the tape. That's not even fair and balanced. That's just straight right-wing propaganda. That's a problem, and it actually needs to be dealt with, because again, this issue is just going to remain front and center, especially going into this year of this presidential election, and all the right-wing candidates talking about how ending trans ideology and wokeness and all of this bullshit is their day one agenda.
you provided, the New York Times defends its reporting on trans issues, saying the paper has published hundreds of articles specifically on discrimination against transgender people and/or anti-transgender legislation since January 2020. Translash's extensive analysis of New York Times coverage of trans issues found disinformation and anti-trans pseudoscience to be regularly elevated in these articles without correction or context. How does the New York Times respond to these findings? And does the New York Times have any standards or guidelines for correcting anti-trans bias in its pages?
Everyone interested in the backstory behind this should listen to Translash and the other episodes too. Link is in the description. If you think this video has any value, please give it a like, comment, and share after you subscribe.
Yeah, that was, oh man, that was the deets. I was looking for some details. We got some fucking details. This is a tragedy. I had kind of, like I said, people had always kind of told me about their bias. You know, I'd unsubscribe to the New York Times again if I could, but I've already done so. Yeah, no, I definitely really appreciate that piece. Let me drop a link in the description, so y'all can go over there, drop a like, drop a sub if you're not already subbed. And yeah, that was super good coverage. But yeah, I think this is really sad. I think when this is the case, it's got to feel like there's nowhere you can go. There is no such thing as a major mainstream news or media outlet that you feel you can trust, or that represents your perspective without bias. And I just don't understand. It literally just feels like they only recognize human beings on one side. If you're a right winger, they're like, oh my God, we've got to be fair to you. We've got to make sure everybody knows where you're coming from. We've got to play devil's advocate with every stupid fucking thing that comes out of your goddamn mouth. But if you're a marginalized person, they just don't seem to realize that those are people too. We were capable of subscribing and buying newspapers. We vote. We're out here working and doing different things. And being fair to fascists is not, it's not being reasonable and unbiased. It's literally bending over backwards to people who are in many ways just trying to destroy democracy and literally trying to take people's rights away. The story is really, really sad. But I definitely glad I watched it with you guys. I wanted to see it. I'm glad that I've heard this story, because it's definitely an example of what's clearly an anti-trans bias. And I think the analysis of their stories and what they've put on their front page, what they've dedicated ink to, speaks. That says a lot. That says a lot. You're a newspaper, so the proof is going to be in the pudding, so to speak. We're going to be able to analyze your coverage and see what perspectives you think are worth giving space to. So I hope that there's a stronger call for accountability. I do think the New York Times is a large enough organization and newspaper that if um, people at the highest levels are not themselves the problem, they definitely have the resources to do something about it. They definitely have the resources to correct these things, to address these type of issues, to improve their representation and to correct their stories. But I think the fact that we're at where we're at right now is probably evidence that that's not going to happen. I wouldn't hold my breath. I'm not really optimistic. I do think that there's um, a mainstream kind of prejudice against the LGBT community and particularly trans people. And it's not just a right wing thing. It's a I don't know what it is. It's a society thing, and you see a lot of this on the left, where people think sacrificing or compromising on certain LGBTQ issues is okay to do if it's politically expedient. Um, I vehemently disagree with those people, but a lot of people think you can be anti-trans with a straight face, um, and still be publicly acceptable to others. And for the most part, that seems to be the case. And so people are unfortunately pretty firm in that position. So I hope something's done about this. I hope there's more pushback. It's obviously going to take um, cis voices and people being outraged and upset about this, in addition to the trans community that's more directly affected. It's like Uncle Bobby says, no movement gains traction until the antagonist joins in on it. So, um, yeah, we trying YouTube, punk man. Our community. We just have a lot of trans and LGBTQ friends, and we try to do what's right by them, like they try to do what's right by us. So um, definitely want to thank them. Learned a great deal, and we're doing the best we can. But this is really unfortunate. And if you do subscribe or consider yourself a fan of the New York Times, think about this. Think about maybe responding to this. I'm not suggesting that um, you should never read the New York Times again, but maybe you're inclined to give them some feedback, leave a comment on one of these stories. Just there's a lot of ways to speak up and be heard. And the first step probably is just understanding it and thinking about it, being aware of it, and being in a position where we're better positioned to hear out our trans family members when they say fuck the New York Times. They're anti-trans. Um, Hopefully, the more people see this story, more people get caught up on this, the more people will listen to that and uh, increase the chance of us responding accordingly. But I'm troubled. I'm troubled by this. I just think the lay of the land is such that, like I said, this is a hot button issue, and it really affects people's lives, and it affects the lives of people we love and care about. And if there's anti-trans persuasion coming from one of, if not the biggest newspaper in the country, it just doesn't say optimistic things. It doesn't say good things about where sort of the Overton window, where we're at right now in this moment. And I understand if for people that's scary, because it's a bit scary for me too. It's just you need platforms like the New York Times to be strong enough, viable enough, and have enough integrity to call a spade on this and make it clear what's right, what's wrong, and that we need to do more than ever. We need to do more than we've ever done to fight to protect and enshrine the rights of trans people. And that includes advocacy for trans youth. And one of the biggest problems in this whole anti-trans panic is the misrepresentation of the associated medical issues. So for, again, probably the largest newspaper in the country to be knowingly misrepresenting the associated medical issues, feeding right into the alt-right propaganda mill, that's a big problem. And it also, to me, raises questions about what level of oversight and regulations do we need when it comes to these issues? Because this is serious shit. And when you got the New York Times putting out articles that sound like they're about to be picked up by Fox News, you talk about being between a rock and a fucking hard place. So that's my take, y'all. But look, we're gonna head back to gather, try to relax, have some R&R, have some fun. I had the day off, so glad to be able to do a stream. It's great to see everybody. Shout out to the host, the co-host, and mods. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. We got 3 shows. I think we got the Blackout at 1, Hot Program at 3:30, and then I will be on Bad Science Sunday on Maya Atkinson's channel. So, I'm trying to get some rest and chill out, have some fun tonight, and get ready to do those 3 shows tomorrow. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment if you're watching later. There's a link in the description to come hang out and gather with us. And then also there are links for the channels of the mods and co-hosts. My one black friend, Uncle Bobby, Gin and Truth on YouTube, Nitty, Maya, Steph, Bree, Ember, I think. So definitely check out those links and go subscribe to those channels if you're not already. I love you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.